Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to the BBSRC's Follow-on Fund webinar today. We're just waiting for the numbers of people joining us to kind of level off and stabilise, and then we'll get going in a minute or so. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, please pop it in the chat. We'll maybe be able to answer, colleagues will be able to answer some of those as we're going through the webinar and the conversation, but we also have a question and answer session at the end where we can explore some of those in more detail as well. So I'll look at my colleagues to see when the numbers are kind of stabilizing. And just so people are aware, we'll record the webinar today. We'll make it available afterwards, and we'll share the slides. So you can pass it around to colleagues and contacts if you want to.
It looks like the numbers have stabilized now. Just had one more join. I think this is probably a good stabilizing point.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And so, yeah, welcome everyone along to the webinar. As you'll see, I'm joined by a number of colleagues from across the UKRI. Thought it would be useful if we introduced ourselves now at the start, so you know who we all are, and then we'll be dropping in and out as we go through the slides, exploring different areas of the follow-on fund and the funding service. So by way of introduction, my name's Adam Bowen. I'm Head of Translation and Innovation Capability at BBSRC. So I'm interested in how we support the translation of bioscience to deliver benefit and impact. I'll now introduce you to a number of my colleagues, just go around the screen. So first of all, Will.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Summers, and I'm the Joint Head of the Research and Innovation Funding Delivery Team at BBSRC.
Thanks, Will. And let's go across now, and Paul.
Good afternoon, my name is Paul Weathers-Green. I am a product manager for the Simpler Better funding program, responsible for the digital delivery of what is being called the funding service.
Thank you, Paul. And David.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm David Hendry. I'm portfolio manager within Adam's team, and I manage the follow-on fund core.
Thank you, David. And Jane.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jane. I'm a portfolio manager in Will's team, and I'm responsible for the peer review delivery of the follow-on fund call.
Thank you, Jane. And Susan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Salisbury. I'm the Senior Engagement Lead for the Simpler Better funding programme, and as Paul said, which is building a new funding service for UKRI.
Thank you all. I'm just going to share some slides and we'll work through, and then you different colleagues will pop up as we go through the presentation. So let me just bring this across. There we go. And just there we go. So as I said, welcome along to the BBSRC Follow-on Fund webinar today. And just to run through some of the aims of what we're hoping to cover. I guess first up is, this is very much a first stage in our engagement with the Follow-on Fund. It's our first webinar about it, and we'd like to get your feedback. So as we're going through, if there are any things that we haven't included or that we could include in future activities like this, please drop us a note either in the chat, or I'll give you an email address at the end as well. Be really keen to hear from you. So we'll be covering understanding what BBSRC supports in the translation space. Then it's focusing down onto the follow-on fund, and we're relaunching that today. And we're going to run through a little bit of how FOF has, applying to FOF has changed a little bit. The principles and the aims of the competition are the same, but there have been a few tweaks and revisions. What good looks like, and some common pitfalls when applying to the competition. And then, as we touched upon, the competition is now going on to the funding service, and we've got colleagues from that team to run through that, to familiarise you with what that system looks like and how to navigate it. And as well as the chat function, we'll have a sort of a panel discussion at the end where all my colleagues will come back onto the screen and we can run through some of the questions. Already touched on this with introducing the people on the call today, but obviously there's more people behind the scenes as well operating on this. So there's also my colleague Helen, works with Jane and David on a day-to-day basis running the competition, and they'll be the people that you will engage with more regularly. And then also my colleague Nick Bassett, who hasn't been able to join us today, is the Associate Director for Innovation, and he provides oversight for all of these different activities. As I'm sure you'll already all be aware of what BBSRC does, I thought I would just touch on it anyway, as I think it grounds some of what we're talking about today. We invest in world-class bioscience within UK research institutions. We support the skills, training and development of the next generation of researchers in the biosciences. But I think importantly, we also look to deliver and support the creation of the wider social and economic impact from those investments through a whole variety of different routes, engaging with business, industry, policy, public goods. And then because the areas we operate in and that we're publicly funded, there's an importance around that public dialogue as well on the value of bioscience. So thinking about our support for bioscience translation, I guess, what do we mean by that? And for me, it means the conversion of bioscience discovery. So from that fundamental pioneer and research to deliver new products, processes and services. And so by providing funding for that, we can enable the technical development of ideas and help bioscientists to innovate. And we have a whole portfolio of support to enable that. A scalable runway of support is how we phrase it sometimes, all the way from early stage user engagement, working with investors to understand what the opportunities are, through to large scale technical development, significant investment. We also look to support the development of entrepreneurial and enterprise skills for researchers through things like, you may have noticed recently, we've been working with Innovate UK and other partners to support bioscience IKEA program, which really looks to develop those skills as well as understanding different routes towards impact. And we partner with an early stage investor called UKI2S, or used to be called the Rainbow Seed Fund. So we support the whole kind of breadth across this space. But today we're very much looking at the follow-on fund, and that is our sort of intervention both through standard and super FOF, which you can see some details on the side there, which looks to bridge that gap between supporting the outputs of bioscience research towards delivering that widest of commercial, social and societal benefit. And it supports kind of, if you're thinking about it, two broad kind of range of activities. It's the activities needed to address that market opportunity and to help researchers to further develop their understanding of those routes to deliver impact. And a lot of the time for these projects at the early stages, when the idea is just emerging from that kind of fundamental research, that route to application might not be especially clear, and this support helps you identify the most appropriate route. And all follow-on fund projects should draw substantially on past BBSRC investment. So that's the sort of the kind of the broad scope and aims of the competition. And then just think of what would be useful now is to run through some of the changes that we've implemented. So working across UKRI with colleagues, we've helped provide a little bit more structure to this case for support. And this is really trying to support researchers applying to the competition to be really clear on what you need to think about when developing these projects, and also to help the committee reviewing these to really understand what opportunities are being addressed and what's actually being done through the work. So it's broken, the case for support now is broken down into 5 broad sections, looking at that market and opportunity. So who are the customers and what's that opportunity you're looking to address? And what are you looking to produce? Is it a product, a service, a technology? Really, what is that opportunity? then a development plan. And this is very much, what are you going to be doing during this project? You know, how's this idea arisen? And then what are those milestones and objectives that you need to undertake through this work to get to a particular point? And there's also an opportunity within this area to articulate what you consider to be the risks and the mitigations for these. Really keen as well then within another section to understand what's considered the kind of the route to application. What's that commercial route, if you like, towards getting that technology out there? And what are the intellectual assets and intellectual property that are around it? Appreciate that at the early stages, there may be no protected intellectual assets such as patents or plant breeders' rights, but what are the things that you need to do or you need to have in place to be able to progress that idea? And then what do you think would be developed over the course of the project? And then we're aware, as well as the product, process, service, technology, there might be wider benefits beyond those immediate pieces to the environment, to society. And there's an opportunity now to articulate that within the submission. And then thinking beyond the regulatory and legal frameworks that you'll have to work within in certain projects, are there any other kind of broader ethical considerations that you're considering as part of this work? And another change is we're aware with follow-on funding in this type of project that you'll have quite a broad spectrum team working on the project, from technical staff through to the lead researchers, as well as others within that research environment. And so working with colleagues across UKI, we are trialing using the resume for researchers and innovators, so the capability to deliver a statement. So it's replacing the traditional CV, and it's looking for these 4 areas that are on the slide for each of the individuals on the project and how they're contributing to those. So it's a slight move away from that, and hopefully this will allow us to look at those expertise and capabilities in a more holistic way. So that's another of the changes. And then a third change, and this is just a slight revision, is that when undertaking a follow-on fund project, it might be necessary to work with and collaborate with external partners to progress that. And there might be a whole variety of reasons to access their kind of capabilities, their expertise, or to test the innovation in a real world environment or setting. So for example, you might need access to fields within a farm setting, or it could be access to commercial scale bread makers in food production. So that might be really, really important to your project. And when you're doing that, we will need a statement of support, and there's details within the guidance documentation for the follow-on fund, as well as within BBSRC grants guide, within the letter of support section. And within this, you should really articulate what those partners are doing, what they're contributing to the project, and how they're going to work with you on that. And another change is that there's no longer a requirement to put in kind of broader support, letters of support and statements from organizations that think the innovation is of value and needed, but aren't actually directly contributing to the project itself, so that those are no longer required through the application process. And thinking of what good looks like in one of these applications, really, if you look at the scope and kind of go, well, actually, projects that address all of these effectively is what good looks like. But I suppose unpacking that a little bit more, it's really having a clear understanding of what the customer need is. What are you trying to address? What problem are you trying to solve? And what do they need? And then having a really clearly articulated development plan where you've got milestones and deliverables. So what will be delivered through this work? What are the outputs and outcomes? And then we're aware that these projects can often be quite risky. And I think it's really important there is an acknowledgement at certain milestones and stages that what the risks might be at these points, and if possible, what mitigation steps you build in around them. And then as you work through the application, really strong ones, really demonstrate how this work that's being undertaken through this funding will help address that market opportunity, and what point will you get to. And then if you are working with project partners, so business and industry, what are they contributing to the project, making sure that's really clearly articulated and defined. And some common pitfalls with applications, often not really covering, or a poor understanding of what the customer need is, not clear on what that opportunity is. I think it's really important that that is covered effectively within the application. And then often linked to that is where a project is trying to address too many opportunities. There might be lots of routes to impact or lots of market opportunities for the innovation, but it's really key that you focus down on a particular area and give a justification and a rationale for why you're focusing down on that area, rather than trying to address too many opportunities through one of these projects at the outset. And then another challenge is often around those intellectual assets of the intellectual property, whether you need access to certain IP at the start of the project to enable you to progress, or what will be produced and how will it be managed as the project goes through and eventually finishes. So really clarity around that position is really important. So those are just some of the pitfalls. Now, so sort of a tour through some of the changes within the follow-on fund. Really interested in what else we could cover within these sort of webinars or some of our paperwork and engagement. So if you got any suggestions there of how we might be able to engage further in the future, please drop an email to the team, which is the Knowledge Exchange and Commercialization team. Email address is there, and we'll share the slides after, so you'll have access to that. What I should say is queries specific about this call and applying. There will be details on how to contact us in specific relation to that through the funding service, and details will come up in the slides to follow. So thank you very much for that. I'm now going to hand over to Susan and Paul, who are going to go through the kind of the simpler, better and funding service, and the new funding service, which is the new way of applying to follow-on funds. So I shall hand over. I shall hide my screen. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks very much, Adam. So yes, it will come as no surprise now, and no doubt you'll all be aware that this opportunity is being piloted on the new funding service. So we wanted to take this opportunity to give you a bit more information about what is the new funding service, what is the Simpler Better funding programme, why is UKRI doing this, and sort of what to expect. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background onto this and a few of the other pilots that we're running at the moment. And Paul is going to then give a demonstration of the actual service to give you sort of a much better feel for what to expect if you haven't yet already started to create your application. So the next slide, please, Adam. Great, thank you. So the Simpler Better funding programme is exactly what it says on the tin. This is our new programme within UKRI to make funding simpler and better for UKRI's academic and innovation communities. We're going to reduce, or we're actively working to reduce funding bureaucracy and to create a user-friendly, flexible funding service with consistent processes and policies which will meet the needs of UKRI and its external communities, so yourself. The Simpler Better funding programme is going to be delivering this new funding service, which is via a new digital platform. So Jez will be a thing of the past. And through this new funding service, we'll be able to use the latest, make sure we use all the sort of latest regulations and standards and promote collaboration and support our diverse community. We're going to be doing this gradually. So as you've seen with this and a few of our other pilots, we're sort of starting out with some initial functionality, but we're going to keep building on this and making more and more enhancements for both sort of applicants, assessors, research office administrators, as well as our staff internally, which will become much more powerful in terms of funding service. But this is very much a sort of a iterative design process, as sort of many modern digital services are, and how they're produced. So it's very user-led. We try and test, and we get user feedback, and that informs our designs, make sure that what we are doing is working. It really gives us an opportunity to make sure that everything is honed to meet all the user needs that we need to. If we go on to the next slide. So this is just to really summarize the pilot opportunities that we've recently launched on the funding service. We did have one with AHRC that we did last summer and the summer before that, which was a simple public engagement type opportunity. And then we've had a recent pilot that we've launched with each of the research councils, all sort of quite different in sort of remit and sort of the nature of what they're trying to achieve. But really sort of a great opportunity to have such a breadth of users sort of right across UKRI's academic applicants. So doing these pilots has given us a really great opportunity to test out the service, sort of our early designs and the actual sort of functionality sort of at the core. And so we will build on that as we get sort of feedback from users and really sort of learn from what's working. These first pilots sort of range from quite simple outline style opportunities to two that will include expert review stage as well as sort of full application. With these pilots, we're not just testing the system and the sort of online functionality, it's also giving us an opportunity to test out some different approaches, different processes and different policies as well for UKRI. What you see piloted at the moment, as I say, is our sort of initial sort of first release. And we're going to build on that. So what you see longer term in terms of the policies and the approaches being tested with these opportunities is going to continue to grow and evolve. So what you see now isn't necessarily the longer term solution for our designs. So the key thing there to take away is that your feedback on this, if you're creating application or supporting applicants using the service, to feedback to us to make sure that we stay on track with sort of what's working well for you and where we can improve. So I'm going to hand over now to Paul, who's really going to sort of give you the demonstration of the actual service. So thank you.
Yes, if you could stop sharing the slides, I can show you the actual product. So the journey for you guys will all start at the funding finder. That is the place how you will first interact with TFS, right here in the Start Application button. We probably is wise to read the funding finder guidance, but once you've done so, you can press the Start Application button and you are directed to the funding service. I'm not going to use this environment. This is the live environment. I'm going to show you the demo environment. So just close the other tab. You will be prompted to create an account. Now, we're not using any of this historic JES data, so you'll have to create a new account. It's as simple as filling in a few data fields, such as your university, which is a type of head pattern that we're using. And then it will be simply a case of filling in first name, last name, email address, and password. On this occasion, there will be your research office will not approve you as an applicant as they do in JES. They will be doing that through the approval process of the application itself. So that is a slight change. As Sue's mentioned before, we are an iterative product. So we start small and grow. So a number of features like that, if it emerges that actually the users really need that and they need that as we scale, then we'll be implementing that based on the user need rather than assumptions of how we used to work in the past. So I'm just going to quickly sign in. Another thing that you will see that is a change from Jez is that you will not have to find the scheme, the call name, the document type, the council. When you log in, an application is created for you straight away. If you've created one in the past, you get this message. So you can either continue with the one you've got or start a new one. I'm going to start a new one. And essentially, this will be your landing page for the application. And everything you need to do will be here on this page. And it's a case of just populating these sections as you go through. For anyone who's familiar with using other government digital services, UKRI as a public sector body is also mandated to use government digital services. And so you will see similar looks and feels that you would with applying for a passport or applying for a driver's license. We use similar looks and feel as other government departments. So I'm not going to go through all of these sections today. I'm just going to cover some simple ones. So we'll start with the applicants team. This is really where you start to define who you are and your team are for this opportunity. It will default to you, and you can assign yourself a role. Most likely, I expect it will be principal investigator. And then you can go ahead and you can add other applicants based on 4 roles that are selected for this opportunity. And again, you'll see it's very similar. It's a sort of type ahead pattern, and then a search. And you can select the appropriate organization, and then fill in the details. So, filling in some of the other questions. Sorry, let's go back to application. You can see that most of the other questions are what we call narrative-based questions. And what's really important here to look out for is this accordion guidance field. What we're trying to really do here is to make sure that most of the guidance you need is all on this page. We don't want you to have to go. So we expect you to read the funding finder in order to apply. But once you start the application process, all the guidance should be on the funding service. It will be repeated from the funding finder. But more importantly, you don't need to navigate elsewhere. There are a few instances where it does refer to some other places, but that's normally where we go off into much more detail. In most of the cases, everything you need will be on this guidance drop down. And that's really important to the funding service to make sure that you as a user have a good experience. So we have these text boxes, and it's called a rich text editor. So there's a number of things that you can do within a rich text editor. Obviously, you have paragraphs and headings that you can select. You can bold, italicize, underscore, bullet point, numbers, indents, links, and you can implement tables. At this present time, because this is one of our first releases, we haven't gone, rather, we're really keen on doing a digital-led application. It has huge benefits riddled throughout the service, not only for you as an applicant user, but the reviewer, the panel member, and actually us internal staff. If we can interact around a digital form, it does make a huge number of efficiencies. But of course, when we took our initial designs out to users early on, what came back loud and clear was actually in order to move away from attachments into a more digital-based form, we had to supply additional ways of creating text or different markup languages. So coming further down the future are things like markup languages for maths, for chemistry, embedding images. Today, those are not here, and we'll see, I'll touch on another question in a moment, where we're using attachments as a workaround for the short term to really test and learn and iterate the product. It's all about really starting small, listening to what you as users are saying and reacting to that feedback. To mark a section complete, you simply do the tick. If you don't want to mark it as complete, you can just save and return. And essentially you fill in the text boxes, mark as complete, save and return, and you start populating these completed fields or the completed statuses down here, and the status bar will grow as you go through it. Another thing that I wanted to call out in terms of sections is that we really are keen to try and do new things in the funding service and make, as our program is entitled, funding much more simpler and much more better. I hate better as a term, but simpler and better. And one of the things that we're really trying is actually, can we make the way we collect finances better, more simple, more simplified in nature? Do we need all the bits and data fields that we collect? And the answer is probably not. What you'll find in this finance question is a template. So we're using a template to collect costs at the moment, to learn about different ways that we can simplify the tests. Once we learn on that, we will then turn that into a digital. And in the future, we will hope to integrate with university systems that we can integrate the programmatically exchange data. So actually, we will further minimize the inputting of finance costs for interoperability in the future. But again, we're starting small.
Paul, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Your sound's gone a bit bizarre. Could you just mute and unmute again and see if that fixes it? Thank you.
That better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay. I'll keep my screen off, so hopefully that should solve it as well. Can you just, Sue, can you tell me where I went croaky?
Oh gosh. I think go back a couple sentences. Say exactly.
All right, go back a couple of sentences. So we are trialing the costing templates to make it much more simple in nature. And so what you'll find is that there's a costing template and you'll be asked to upload that costing template. So what I failed to show you on the other rich text editor is that we now base everything on word counts. So as you type, you can see the word count going down. And when you're prompted to do a file upload, you get some guidance again behind an accordion, and you get to choose a file. For now, we are kind of restricted to it being a PDF file type and of just one PDF. Again, we will iterate this and grow to JPEGs and other data types that we can support. That's largely it for the funding service in terms of putting a question. The other tab to really be useful is that when we were talking to users about digital application forms, what was very crucial was the user wanted to be in control of the way that their information was presented. So what we've done is put a read application tab in. So as well as writing the application, you can then hop over to see how it will be presented. And it is the office that will see this view. It is the reviewers that will see this review. And it will ultimately be the panel that will see this view. And so it's really important that we implement this read-only screen so that you can be in complete control over how your information was presented. And that was a real insight to how we turn attachments into a digital application form. That's more it for filling in. This opportunity has a number of sections, some of which aren't necessarily relevant for particular types of science being funded. So you may find in the short term you're writing not applicable in some of these boxes. In the future, they're likely to be turned into more binary sort of yes/no questions with follow-ons. Again, we're starting small and we're growing and we're scaling. So I'm just going to hop over to one that I have previously done. I just need to move my Zoom bar, where I can show you one that is ready to submit. So in this one, I've completed all the sections. It's 100% complete, and I can scroll down and I can send to my research office. So it's important to say that your research office is still responsible for submitting. And we urge you to contact your research office as soon as you are thinking about starting an application, as is the way. Your research office will have visibility of your application from the very moment you create one under their organization name, but they will probably still require you to tell them that you're creating one. If you don't know who your research office contact is, please contact our help desk, and Sue's at the end of this demo will show you the contact details for our help desk. So sending to your research office is as simple as a button press. We get this what's called a bit of friction, so that you can really confirm it's not an accidental button press, that you can definitely make a conscious decision to submit, and then you get this. And then you'll be able to see that on your dashboard page, it's now with the research office, and when they've submitted it, it will then say submitted. So we're really interested. We are, as Sue's mentioned, a user-centered design practice, starting small and growing. So the very next things we want to build, we want to do so, knowing exactly that what we're building is for users, or will be relevant for users. It's intuitive, it's smart, it's simple, it's better, and all those things. So on every page we have a link to a feedback survey. You also see on the right hand side there will be a little feedback button. It's not showing on this demo environment, but it is on the live service. So on every single page you can comment if you don't like the page, and we do read every single comment. So we're really, really interested to see what you have to say about the new funding service. But please bear in mind, it is a start of a very long journey, and you won't see everything that you would expect to see from day one. But again, let us know. It sometimes helps us, even if we are aware of things that we need to build in the future, having feedback that tells us to do so can help us prioritize the thing that we build next. So I'm going to stop sharing there and hand back over to Sue.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'll put my video back on. Adam, if you could bring the slides up. We just had a couple more slides to finish off, which just really reiterate the contact details. So we have a funding, a dedicated help desk team for handling queries on the funding service, and for this, thank you, and for this and the other pilot opportunities. So please do go to them if you have questions relating to the opportunity or funding service. I've also put the details in the chat, so you've got that to hand too. I've also included details of a recent recording from a webinar that we did just before Christmas, which was aimed at research officers, which talks a lot more about the administrator role that Paul was describing towards the end of that demonstration. So we have a recording for that, it will be useful. And if we go to the next slide, this was just to reiterate the call to arms, the sort of request for feedback. So I'll put the link for that survey in the chat as well, so you have that to hand. As Paul said, it's available on the funding service, so when you're actually using it and you have direct feedback, you can add it there. So thank you very much for your time, and yeah, if you've got any questions for us, we'll be here till the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Paul. And thank you everyone for your attendance today. We've got a couple of questions that I can see there. and I'm going to look to colleagues for that around, can partners be international companies in Europe? David.
And yes, so project partners can be international, but it should be explained why they are the partner of choice, and especially if there are comparable UK companies that could potentially carry out that work with you.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And then there is a question about Jez. I don't know whether, Susan, you've got when's Jez going to be redundant?
Absolutely. So I think the key thing to point out here is that we're going to be introducing the new funding service. And as we use the new funding service more and more for more opportunities, more funding types, Jez will get used much less until the point that the funding service can do all that UKRI needs to. So it's going to take sort of a couple of years, well, it's going to be a few years where the funding service is going to continue to grow and develop and really have a place for continuous improvement.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, I think there'll be quite a few things. And
there was another question in the chat that I spotted, and yes, you can have multiple project partners involved. It basically they need to all describe what they'll be providing to the project, and how the project will benefit from their involvement, and together how that will benefit the project as a whole.
Thank you. And then there's another one here about, can you enter a company as a collaborator if they do not appear in the drop-down menu? I'm not too sure whether that will be Paul.
At the moment, the collaborator narrative box, so you'll be entering that as narrative, not as selecting an organization. In the future, we'll be turning most of these project partner sort of facilities, ones that are more data-driven questions, into specific data lookup questions. But at the moment, they're largely narrative, where you can type in the organization in whatever form that you would be used to.
Thank you. I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions coming through. And then there's one around, would you expect partner to be making cash contribution towards the project costs? David, do you want to?
So yeah, in answer to that question, it's a project partner can provide whatever support they would like to the project, and that's something you discuss with them. So it's they can provide cash contributions to help with the work that's going on, and their contribution to that work, or it can be in kind as well. So if they're providing access to their facilities to carry out some of that work, yes. So it's a combination of cash and in kind that's welcome as part of being a project.
Thank you, David. And then I'm happy to answer one, and then I think there's probably one for Paul and Susan as well. So do we distinguish between ideas around know-how and those with patents? So recognize that actually quite often there might not be a patent associated with a project, and that's not an issue. I think it's absolutely fine for there to be a project based around sort of either know-how or other kind of intellectual asset. I think as long as it's clearly articulated what that is, and how that will be kind of progressed or exploited or will enable deliver impact, and if there are any risks around having particular assets as the core part of the project. And then just looking, there's one around, will attachments appear in the read section? I'm guessing that's more for Paul.
Yes, they do. They appear as links, so they're not as embedded images. If in the future there is a need for attachments to be more embedded images, then we can iterate based on user feedback. But at the moment, they are purely links in the read-only view that then open as a separate tab.
Thank you. There's also a question around co-investigators and other institutions, and how the system lines up, and whether if it's being led by a particular institution, and how that will be captured.
So at the moment, all the research office interaction is around the organisation of the PI. COI organisations and research offices of those organisations have no interaction with TFS as it stands today. But again, we are aware of the need for co-investigator organisations to be more collaborative with an application, and that is something that we'll be considering in the future.
Thank you. I'm just trying to keep up with the various questions coming in. There is something around can a subcontractor company that are not collaborators? I'm happy to pick that one up. So it's yeah, sometimes elements of the project will be best placed within a commercial environment where you have subcontracted out to have that activity undertaken. And I think that's absolutely fine. We often see that with certain elements where you need that kind of commercial scale-up environment, and those can come in through this competition. Yes. What else have we got? Requirement on PI time spent on the project. So I don't know whether that's captured within this current system.
So that is currently captured in the finance costing spreadsheet, or the template that we'll be using again in the future. That template is very much going to be turned into a digital field where we will capture it. But for now, it is in the costings template.
Excellent, thank you. And just looking, so I'm just moving my sheets around. There is, let me just have a look. So the link of whether a DTP funded student would be eligible. Typically, this isn't usually the link that we'd look for. We'd look for something that's gone through so the kind of the research route. Generally, when we look at one of those research groups that's got the PhD student in it, almost always there is a portfolio of research, and we always kind of try to look quite holistically at that portfolio within that research group. And then, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that last question that we've got there, the straight answer is no, they cannot. A postdoc would be a researcher in this on this call, although we'll be looking at the classifications going forward for like previously we've had researcher co-investigators, and so that might be something that we can reinstate later on, but it's something that we're looking into, and it's also kind of fits in also with some of the work going on with the Simpler Better funding service as well.
Thank you, David. And do you want to actually pick up on the collaboration piece as well?
Yes, I'm just going to read through 1 second. So we don't expect a collaboration agreement to have been agreed at the start. I mean, if that's something that's there in place already, then essentially that's fine, as long as it meets within our guidance and our guidelines in terms of conditions, etc., of our grants. But essentially, we do request or require that a collaboration agreement is signed once a grant is awarded. So we wouldn't expect it to happen before a grant is awarded, purely because it's not clear that you'll be funded because it's a competition. But once an application has been awarded, we would expect that the partners involved would sign collaboration agreements.
Thank you. And there's a question there about IAA funding. So IAA funding as a link on its own at present wouldn't be considered a link. We're obviously aware that there are quite a few kind of block allocations around now, and we're exploring actually how can we start to open the competition up. But at present, no, the IAA funding wouldn't be considered the link. I'll just give it a moment to see whether we get any further questions coming through. And as I said, we'll make the slides and the recording of this available afterwards, and we'll circulate the links to that so they can be shared more widely around your organisations if you want, or you can go back and listen to pieces again. There we go. And we've got one around whether co-applicants can edit the application and whether that's possible.
No, all the interaction is done by the principal investigator. It is one of the things that we learned when we were doing user research is that most of the collaboration happens outside of most tools and most funding services. So we've gone with that adage that we expect the collaboration probably to happen in something like Google Docs, Microsoft Teams, and what we've learned from user research is people then come back and fill it in TFS. So we haven't implemented any collaboration tools in TFS whatsoever. But again, if we find that that's coming out in user research and feedback, then we can iterate and learn for that in the future. But from what we know to date, most collaboration, even if we built such a feature, most collaboration would seem to happen outside of the funding service.
Thank you, Paul. And then will we have another call? David, I don't know whether you've got a feel for the dates of future ones.
Yes, I do. So we've got it's going to run the same similar to last year. So current call closing in March, but the next call will look to be opening in early August and closing in early October. So similar timeframes to the previous year. Thank you.
Yeah, and we tend to run two rounds a year. So yeah, and it's an ongoing responsive competition. So that with all the usual caveats, yes, we expect to be running several more of these in the future. Thank you, David. Any more questions coming through? I can't see any coming through at the moment. So if there's no more questions, I'd just like to thank everyone from across the team that's been involved in this today, and for all of the questions and people attending, hugely appreciated. And we look forward to receiving any feedback on the system or through various emails and so on. I have noticed one coming up is FOF review to an internal panel. No, there is an external committee, and the details of that committee is available on our website. So that's an external peer review panel. Excellent. So thank you all, and take care. And we shall circulate the links to this shortly, including the slides and the recording.